Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be going over the Game Watch interview that they did with Naoki Yoshida at the recent Paris Fan Festival. Before we get started, a couple things. One, thank you to Shinitan for translating this over on Reddit. We've referenced your work before and we very much appreciate it, so please go to the description of this video, go to their Reddit post, comment on it, interact with it, give them Reddit gold, whatever makes you feel good, but give credit to the original source for this video. On top of that, sorry if I seem a little bit off, I stutter a little bit. My body has not taken kindly to my sleep schedule this last week between Kingdom Hearts 3 and Fan Festival, so I'm honestly running on fumes right now and a couple of shots of Fireball. So apologies for that in advance. Anyway, this interview was mostly standard. Honestly, there isn't too much to really dig to, but there are some interesting details that come out about things such as Gunbreaker and its design, as well as the collaboration, or I guess the integration of Yoko Taro and the Yorha Dark Apocalypse raid series. Anyway, first bunch of questions are fairly standard with a few interesting points thrown in there. Why is Gunbreaker a tank and not a DPS? And they said that they didn't want to throw off the balance. And it seems to have nothing to do necessarily with how many DPS were released in Stormblood, but specifically how many DPS are in the game. He even specifically mentions melee DPS, which now have 4 options, whereas tanks, another melee job, only have 3. Either way, I think it's much deserved that we're getting a 4th tank, and you know, I'm glad that they decided to go with it. They go into a couple of reasons why they picked Gunblade, and his surprise that 70% of the community approximately guessed that it would be a tank. And we guessed it for the same reasons why they did it. Job balance and design policy. And it makes sense. So I'm glad that it worked out kind of as we predicted. In the second question, they ask, special characteristics, go into a little bit more detail about the job. How is it going to fit with already 3 tanks in the game? And just like we expected, they're not really going to give us any job details until May. This has been normal with the last couple of expansions, and even going all the way back to A Realm Reborn. While we did have beta tests to get some idea of the skills, they still underwent a lot of changes well before we actually got our hands on them, going all the way up to level 50 in the eventual open beta that we had. He also goes into talking about how the current 3 tanks, he doesn't want them to form a triangle. And then if he adds a 4th tank into it, it might feel a little bit weird. So he might balance them by having 2 main tanks and 2 off tanks. I guess it depends on how they're defining it, because we define main tank and off tank currently by how much raid DPS you contribute by being in either of those roles, specifically at the start of the fight. Paladin, while you might see its ultra defensive kit and go, wow, that should probably be a main tank, and I totally understand that, the majority of raid players look at Paladin and go, you're an off tank because you don't have a very good way of contributing to the start of the fight in terms of your DPS if you're stuck in the main tank role. Whereas a job like Warrior, for example, does really well in that slot and well outperforms it, while Paladin performs on such a higher level in the off-tank role at that point. Those are just the kind of details that we look at. And I'm curious how they're viewing it. Are they viewing it like we do or viewing it like they do? So that's a big question right now, but they are just trying to make it so everyone wants to play every tank. And honestly, unless you're doing speed kills, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter now. It's never mattered. Even when people meme on jobs like Samurai, whatever, it's not like it's not clearable. It's just that it's clearly not the best. And that's a big distinction that I wish more people could make, consciously without just having this sort of herd mentality. Either way, again, he just keeps saying, wait till May. Gunbreaker. Now, this next detail is important because when Gunbreaker was revealed, I was like, oh my god, it's Dark Arts again. Like, I was afraid it was like Dark Arts with an ammo system. And apparently, they don't plan on making players pull the trigger every time. They don't say we don't have to pull the trigger, but not every time. So I'm wondering if it's like a stance that chooses when you want to expend ammo with your attacks versus you pressing it like right after a skill every time. In Final Fantasy VIII, when you hit the R1 button during a basic attack or during a limit break for a Squall, it would basically crit. You'd see the bullets go off and it would form a critical hit. It seems, so for that I expect it to be like Dark Arts, but like after you hit the skill. And it seems like they don't want to go there because apparently controller players would get tendinitis. So, again, wait till May. It'll have its own job system and they're not going to go crazy with it with that many inputs. And then why did they pick the Squall-like Gunblade instead of the Garlean Gunblades? We already had those in game. It made so much sense. He says the reason why is he wasn't involved in 1.0's story, but he goes into more detail, also saying that he feels like when people think Gunblade, they think Squall, they think Cypher, they think Final Fantasy VIII. And with that, it just makes way more sense to have that one be the more important one. And I have to agree with him. You know, I definitely prefer that design. While, yes, the Garlean one is more like a bayonet. He even describes it here. And it's a lot more realistic. It's a weapon that's existed. Maybe not in the exact same form as the Garleans, but it's practical. Whereas Gunblades in 8 are not practical at all. They're also far more iconic. And I kind of appreciate the decision to go with that. You know, obviously, since it's not a Garlean weapon, they need to explain it in the game, and they will. And that's really all I could ask for, personally. And then, tell me how the ammunition works. Please wait till May. When did you decide to do Gunbreaker? Around 4.1. He even talks about how he's planning the next 2 years out. This month, he has to get his plan out for the next 2 years. Man, you're a hard worker, Yoshi P. I appreciate that. I do. But on top of that, we're talking about Gunbreaker all this time. And this question right here pretty much sums up how we all felt at the end of the opening keynote. Yo, where's my t-shirt? Where's the hint for the second job? And he plays it all coy, like, I don't know why everyone thought there'd be a hint. You know, everyone thinks I'm wearing these shirts as teasers. No, I just like the Please. He says that it's, you know, obviously they want more details for FanFest. You know, they didn't give a hint. It's a little bit more fun leaving it in the dark, but the fact is, it can't really say much because of lore reasons. And honestly, it's kind of nerve-wracking to me because the last FanFest is March 23rd. And unless I misheard them, I'm pretty sure they said that the date, which late March is usually the last Tuesday, that's how they've always meant it in the past, would be, you know, the Tuesday following the last FanFest. So what can they even do that's different in the next one that from the previous one if patch 4.56 hasn't happened yet? I think it really has to be the weekend before, and then I guess that kind of that kind of like screws people who need to travel to the Japanese Fan Fest. There's not really much of a win-win situation here. It's just kind of odd how closely it's timed with FanFest overall. Even back in 2.4, I think we were still like 10 days out from the patch when we went to the first FanFest. So we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Anyway, oh wait, was that 2.4 or 2.5? That was 2.4. Yeah, 2.4. Anyway, moving on. Oh man, and then Male Vieira's. I'm going to be doing a whole nother video about Male Vieira's, and I think it's for the reasons that he lists here. He's like, Male Vieira's are extremely rare and never appear. How are you going to introduce them in 14? He says, who knows? I'm a contrarian. So first of all, I'd like to point out a few things. Since it's you, Yoshida, we think there will be Male Vieira. In 12, they're extremely rare, never appear. How are you going to introduce them? So it's not asking, will they exist? It's asking, how will you introduce them? And he says, who knows? Who knows? I'm a contrarian. When you say Yoshida would definitely do this, makes me not want to answer. So, you know, I kind of understand that, but obviously the reason he doesn't want to answer is because they deliberately left it in the dark. Another thing I'm going to be covering is the press conference, and there he says, you know, there's still one more FanFest, right? And I think it's because people don't expect there to be Male Vieira, you know, because of Final Fantasy XII, not really understanding that Final Fantasy XIV does have them, and he even explains that here, that Matsuno put all sorts of hints about Male Vieira in the actual text at the Wandering Dramaturge in the Prima Vista. And while the details there make it seem like, you know, maybe we wouldn't get them, there's other lore things that people have to consider when thinking about Male Vieira altogether. Ultimately, he doesn't answer the question, and it's because it doesn't ask, will there be them? He says, how will you introduce them? So, but he does go on to say, Matsuno's got hints, so please go read them. And that's a pretty important detail, if you ask me. He even labels the two tribes, and I wonder if they're mentioned anywhere in this interview. The Vina and the Rava, one lighter skinned, one darker skinned. There was even mention of I guess a race, or I think it was, I don't know if it was a race or a hairstyle by Name-san, who was the costume designer. And she talked about working on that, and Yoshida gave her an oi and told her to stop pretty much talking about it. So there's always the possibility for one of the other tribes, like the Fiol, for example, to pop up and have a more dominant male species in appearance. But I just think they're going to be very much like the females, just men. I don't know how else to put it. Well, the pre-order bonus, the Aetheryte earrings, stacked with other EXP boosting items, says yes, but there's a limit, which is weird because I guess there must have always been a limit because I've stacked 1 million of them at this point. So, and we had all Amigan earrings before anyway, so it's not like we're getting, it's new on the higher levels, but either way, don't forget that these Aetheryte earrings will be available on March 1st. They last from levels 1 to 70 with an EXP bonus of, I think, 30%. And the stats actually scale as you level up, so you don't need to replace the earring the whole way through, but it's also not overpowered the whole way through. And with that, they ask, would you ever consider doing this for other slots? And I kind of like his answer, because I remember heirlooms in World of Warcraft having a somewhat adverse effect despite them being so useful. Basically, he said, if you do this system too often, then it makes items worthless. You know, everything from 1 to 70 for earrings is now technically useless, outside of if you like to actually look at the earrings on your character. So if they do that for every slot, then all of a sudden, all of these other items have no value at all. Yes, their value is not insanely high now, but they lose a ton of value for players who are in those level ranges. You pretty much just have these things like aetheryte earrings, or you don't have really good options that are affordable outside of going into dungeons and getting drops. So it seems to be a good idea. They do say that if they ever make content that's like locked away, like Eureka, that maybe in a place like that, more gear that's like heirloom gear would make sense. But other than that, you know, probably not going to see it used all too often. And no matter what, it's going to need his approval. Now they start asking about the upcoming raid series, Yorha Dark Apocalypse. I don't think I'm ever going to get used to saying that. And that's the Nier Automata inspired one with the producer Saito-san and of course the game designer Yoko Taro, as everyone knows him. First question, is Platinum Games helping them develop the boss fights? And no, it's the games have no relation to each other in terms of gameplay. They'll share assets and nothing else. Then he asked him what he thought of Yoko Taro. He thinks he's incredibly smart. He gave off very much genius vibes, and the way that Yoko Taro likes to scar people who play his games and experience his stories. So he has an appreciation for him on a big level, and he says that he loves talking with him just about games. Like, he could just get into a conversation and just talk endlessly. And then, you know, I really appreciate Game Watch just straight up bringing the polarizing response to Yorha. While I have my own opinions on it, I think my first reaction was, that's fucking awesome. Like, I'm not even a big Nier fan. I just thought it was cool, like really cool. But I know plenty of people who are worried about it integrating into the lore of Final Fantasy XIV, and I think Golden Top put it best. And I think the tweet went something like this. You don't know who he is. Come on, you need some laughs. You should go YouTube him. He said on Twitter, he was like, rides in my Regalia car, driving past the Rathalos Mount to get to the Nier raid. Man, Male Vieira are so lore unfriendly. It's like they can write it in, and after having a space robot that chased a dragon across a galaxy to land on a planet, to crash into it, to be taken by a civilization, have his technology harnessed to create a massive empire that would eventually learn to clone people and grow them to abnormal sizes, who would then wake up several thousand years later to create a pocket dimension in the corner of the world where he can form everything out of his own thoughts and threaten the world to create his own experiments. Let me just say, I can believe in androids. And I'll probably repeat that line in another video about the Yorha raid. And so I'm glad to see they're kind of taking a chance with this, but not everyone's okay with that. And they said that they're going to make it fit in 14. Yoko Taro is going to make it fit in 14. That's part of his kind of instruction, him and Saito-san. So, you know, they don't want to impose too much of Nier into the game. It has to make sense. And that's what I'm holding out for. If they make it make sense, I'm cool with it. That's how I always feel about Final Fantasy XIV, and that's fine. It's just that it's the first collaboration that's canon, because all the previous, like, you know, Rathalos and Garo, those aren't considered canon. They're just, they appear, but they're not considered canon. The upcoming 15 one is not considered canon. So it's just, people have to separate that. But this is going to be their chance. We'll get to see how they do make it canon. Starts talking about Saito-san, you know, how he started working with him with Dragon Quest X, the Japanese-only Dragon Quest MMO, and he calls him the top producer of Square Enix, and he showcases a great amount of respect and faith for Saito-san on this project. He wishes he got to talk to him more. He only gets to drink with him once or twice a year, but, you know, he definitely hopes that this gives him more opportunities to drink together. Yoshi P, it's a lot of beer. It's a lot of beer. Also, Yoko Taro said the story's not even done. He says Yoko Taro has an idea in his head, and now he needs to get it on paper and then integrate it into the Final Fantasy XIV lore. They brought up the idea. What did you think when they brought up the idea? oh, that makes sense. We could certainly use something more interesting, but he doesn't want to talk about it too much, so he didn't. Matsuno-san tweeted that he's passing the baton in terms of the you know, guest producer for the 24-man over to Yokotaro. And, you know, he kind of just asks Yoshi P, the interviewer from Game Watch, asks him about continuing Return to Ivalice. And I kind of agree with him. I didn't necessarily feel like it was completed, but that story was done, but that, you know, the integration of it into the lore. I just kind of get that feeling because, you know, Viera are going to be introduced, Raktica Greatwood, Nummo. We are going to see a lot more Evolution, I guess, entities that are going to be present, but they're going to exist on Hydaelyn in our own way. And it seems like that's kind of the big thing. He does kind of wish that Matsuno, he would like to find a way to collaborate with Matsuno in a different way if given the opportunity. He says he's a Matsuno believer, and he's glad that people who played Final Fantasy Tactics were happy with the ending, even if he knows there are some people who didn't really like it because they didn't have any sort of context from Final Fantasy Tactics. He's happy for the people who did like it because they did have context. On top of that, then there's questions about the trailer and FanFests overall. Talking about the trailers at Las Vegas, we went, oh, now at Paris it changed what we see. The presentation seems like it's meant to mislead us. Like if we interpret it directly, we'll be far off from the truth. So yeah, basically Yoshi P admits that the way that the trailers have been presented to us is meant to make us kind of, you know, if we follow it directly, then we won't find what we're looking for. You know, kind of implying there's a bunch of red herrings in there. And ways things will happen are not really as they would happen. And it kind of makes sense. It's been like that in the previous trailers as well. This one's just far more mysterious. There's just an air of what the hell is going on here. A lot more than the previous ones. And it's left people wanting more, but also talking about it a lot more. I really like the new design for the Shadowbringers trailer. Even if, kind of like the Stormblood trailer, it's a little disjointed. Excuse me, it's a little disjointed. On top of that, you know, we will see the final trailer at Tokyo. He didn't really give us much more detail, and he says you probably won't understand it until you see it with the main scenario quest as context. He says they're meant to be impressive, but obviously when you actually look at the main scenario, it makes a whole lot more sense. And you know, that makes perfect sense. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and talk about that too much. Next, we talked about the Baldessian Arsenal, which is the public dungeon, the ultra high-end instance inside of Eureka Hydatos, which comes out on February 12th. And he basically just said the concept behind it is to bring some hardcore essences. You know, Nakagawa is a hardcore 11 player. He's a huge vet. And, you know, he just wants to kind of let him, you know, just do whatever he wants with that. There's a warning before you go in, and they talk about that. You know, they really want people to understand you're getting yourself into something really, really deep, and that you need to be ready for the fact that you're going to fail and you're going to die and you're going to probably lose a level or things like that. So basically, he does say a few things that kind of pull back on that idea, though. He does say that, you know, maybe there'll be like a domino effect. You see one person die and then you screw up and die. Things like that. But he says he doesn't think the boss mechanics themselves are that difficult. But the simple fact that you can't retry inside, you can't go back in again immediately either, will create this sort of pressure on players that makes it more difficult. This is in line kind of with something he said a few months back in regards to Hydatos, where he said that players will eventually, you know, find like a Logos set, you know, people will bring certain Logos actions and they'll probably roll through it. But early on, there's going to be that air of mystery, you know, how do we actually go about doing this? And that kind of echoes the sentiments here, where it's not like it's crazy difficult. You just don't know it yet, and there's not really a chance to come back once you've screwed up. So, I want to see how it turns out, because this is definitely a big emergency mission 2.0. You know, we need to see how it turns out, because emergency missions were a disaster for similar reasons, because they were unrecoverable if things started falling apart. And this may drive people away in that same way. It just depends on how it actually pans out. We also don't know what the reward structure is like, and there's no mention of that here either. What else is there? Let's see. Please tell us about trusts. He just says you really need to see it. They can't really say much else about it, but he, yeah, that's it. Please wait. Development was not delayed on it is all we got. And then also they asked why they chose Name-san for the dev panel. I mean, they asked her, they had a different designer on. They said Europe as a community, they noticed is a lot more artsy, so they wanted somebody who wasn't necessarily like a hardcore battle developer or something on. They wanted something that kind of fit the general community a little bit more. I can't speak for the European community, just telling you what Yoshi P says. On top of that, yeah, it's just, he told her that she can refuse if she wanted. And then she apparently last minute accepted. Final Fantasy XI Wiki's already updated. I'm assuming that's a reference back to 2 questions ago in regards to the trust system. I feel a bit bad for them sticking to what was written in blogs 10 years ago. And 14, we can say that's wrong in live streams and whatnot. I almost feel like, I know there's some things that I'm not going into full detail on the Name-san thing, but I feel like there's something missing between the last 2 questions. It feels like the last one, the one I'm reading now, is like about trusts and not about Name-san, because they're talking about how she got picked. But meanwhile, this 11 Wiki's already updated thing is way different. 11 community is still in a closed-off era, and the devs don't have that same level of communication with the players, which is very true. They have a couple of posts, but they don't have like direct line of communication nearly as much as Final Fantasy XIV does. But 11's under his jurisdiction. If you didn't know that, he's been in charge of the business division, the MMO business division, for quite some time now. We've learned a few things, you know, a detail here and there about 11 Mobile from Yoshida. And yeah, I mean, that's how we know that thing in the first place. And even Yoshida says he's been playing Final Fantasy XI a little bit more lately. So I wonder if he's using it for ideas or trying to get a better idea of, I don't know, something like Dancer? No, never mind. We're not going to go there in this video. Will there be a benchmark with the character creator? Yeah, probably around the time that people do spring PC replacement. Okay. I mean, we knew there would definitely be a benchmark. Graphics requirements, will they go up? No, but they are getting rid of DirectX 9 and 32-bit support. And so that will improve a lot. You know, they're not going to be inhibited by the same memory cap anymore. So, you know, with that, they're not going to be changing the engine like through and through. But, you know, I think it makes sense to not really increase the graphic requirements. Keep in mind, we're not talking about the top of the graphics. We're talking about the requirements. And so increasing those is still not great. You still have a lot of people with low-end PCs. So working on things that I guess the people on the higher end can appreciate, as opposed to raising the requirement, are 2 very different things. So raising the requirement definitely doesn't seem like it should be in the cards right now. And with less than 2% of their user base having 32-bit support, or 32-bit I guess OSs, then I don't know, just seems like it makes sense. And I am still hoping for something, a major graphical improvement in 6.0. Nothing that would be outside of what the engine is capable of, but you know, something impressive, as I do have a PC that can push it to the max. I just like to push it a little bit more. Next month's FanFest is in Tokyo. What are the highlights? Holy shit, 15,000 people are going to that one. What the hell? Yeah, we definitely need a bigger venue for NA next time. That was a big talk when it came to NA. My goodness. What? All right, the stage is going to be unusual. And when you arrive at the venue, you'll be like, what? Oh my, he says it's like a mini TGS. Oh my, now I wish I was going, but I'm also kind of glad I'm not at the same time. He says, I'm sure there'll be a lot of news. Will a 90-minute keynote be enough? And he says he's going to narrow it down to the most major topics, but he says it will have some big reveals. Things like the trust system, though, are going to be hard to understand without seeing them in action. There's going to be a lot of talk, you know, what happens, you know, such as how it's detailed, whether you swap out characters, what happens when you clear the MSQ. Some things would be better suited to a live letter. So in other words, don't expect to hear about trusts in the keynote. Expect that for a live letter at some point, but not the opening keynote. And he says he hasn't even wrote a single word for it. It exists in his head, but he hasn't gotten it out on stage. He also says the guests will be amazing. So either way, that's going to be a wrap for our coverage of this Game Watch interview. By the way, also, I kind of forgot to mention at the beginning, the translation's here, but also the original source to the Game Watch interview is there as well. So be sure to, again, go there and give them all your support. But anyway, I've still got more recording to do. And as you can tell, probably I am super tired. So thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and keep an eye out for a bunch of things related to FanFest coming out this week, including State of the Realm, which we skipped last week because of Kingdom Hearts 3, and now we have this week to talk about FanFest. So anyway, thank you for watching. I will see all of you in the next video. Don't know where I was going with that. And take care. I don't know what's happening. You know what? I'm ending the video. Goodbye. How about that? See ya.